We do video, but without cameras, actors, studios, and all those things you'd otherwise need to make a video. It's pretty simple. You log into our web application, you select one of these avatars, you write in your script, and then there's kind of a simple video editor. It's kind of like making a PowerPoint slide or using Canva that allows you to actually finalize your video and put in a screen recording or images, whatever other stuff you need. It's not made for creating entertainment or storytelling content, really. It's made much more for creating informative how-to content, and most often in a business context. But the thing we discovered was that a lot of people who didn't have a use for it themselves would be like, even investors would be like, well, I mean, it's definitely cool, but who's gonna watch these videos, right? They're not great. And the thing we learned was that is true, but that's because when most people think of video, they think of a beautiful video like one we're recording right now, all the stuff that like flow to the top of YouTube, right? The reality is that 90%, if not more, of all the world's videos are really bad, really ugly. They're just really crappy videos. If we can take all those videos and we can make them just a little bit better, a little less crappy, that actually has a lot of value. I've always been really interested in frontier technology and what's gonna change the world, right? What's gonna have a really big impact on how we live and work and play. And 10 years ago, I started developing an interest in AI. I was starting to see very early machine learning having kind of like an outsized impact in some of the work that I was doing myself. And a few years later, it's just very obvious to me that artificial intelligence and this way of building software, this way of solving problems, is going to be a fundamentally new paradigm shift. And so I felt like this is going to be maybe even bigger than the internet itself, bigger than computers in itself. And so obviously to me, that feels like the place that you want to play in, right? If you want to have an impact and do something of consequence. I think one mistake that I have made and that you can make is that you get too obsessed about the technology in itself rather than the problem you're trying to solve. The technology, of course, is a very, very important part of solving most problems, especially if you work in tech. But there's a tendency for people to kind of forget that ultimately, at some point, you can build the coolest technology in the world, but if it doesn't solve a problem for anyone, then it's not going to be a business. And that's okay if you're not trying to build a business. If you work in a research lab, that's completely fine. But if you want to make a business, you have to eventually build a product, right? And so I think making sure that you don't kind of default into building things that are interesting just for the sake of being interesting, but things that actually solve a problem is one I see a lot of entrepreneurs and AI companies today kind of fall into that trap. For me, there is research and writing. So research, I think it's incredibly powerful to use, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever thing that you like to use to do basic research for you, right? I often have conversations with these tools at work. It could be about, literally anything from like business strategy to help me name this product. I'm building something that can do these different things. I'm struggling to find a name. Give me 10 examples. Gives you 10 examples, right? And then you type something and you give 10 other examples. I say I rarely end up taking one of those things, but it's fantastic for inspiration, right? And it goes a bit with writing as well, where even just at a very basic level, if you want to like take something and, in my world, we work with video. So if I have something I've written and I want to turn it into a video, you speak differently in a video than you do when you write something, right? It's a very easy fix. Just put it into ChatGPT, say, hey, turn this into a video script instead. And there's so many of these like small operations that just, I think, makes all of us so much more efficient. I think right now, most people think of AI as being ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is amazing. It's fantastic innovation and it'll change the world. But AI is having a huge impact in so many other fields. I'm particularly excited about how it's accelerating science and biology, understanding our DNA. Yesterday, I learned about how deep learning is used to simulate different designs of fission reactors, which could be one of the solutions to the climate problem that we're facing. So I really think AI is just going to accelerate more or less everything that we're doing, right? From the creative fields that we operate in, to very deep mathematical physics, biology questions. I think that's really cool. I think we'll continue to see models getting bigger and bigger, but I think what a lot of people are realizing now is that models that are kind of like one shot, as in you give them some text and they spit something out. That could be a text answer, it could be an image, it could be speech, it could be a music piece, something like that. It's very cool and very demoable and very fun. But to get these systems to actually produce valuable output, you have to be able to control things in the middle. And that often means that just using text as the input is not good enough. If you're trying to create an image, it's very difficult to describe the perfect image, right? You need to have different control systems for different modalities. That's also something we're building into our systems, but it goes all the way, I think, down into the model layers. And so what we're seeing now is that we're now figuring out that these things are very, very powerful. But for them to be actually truly useful for more than just like fun demo content, you need much more control. And so that's what people are trying to build into the models now across all modalities. Hollywood will be the first to adopt AI video to create really awesome storytelling content. That just never happens, right? New technology is always adopted by the young, the grassroots movements. And I think what we'll see in the coming years in the kind of entertainment space of AI video is that you'll have all the world's YouTubers who have all the ideas but none of the budget. They will be able to bring their ideas to life in a very new way, right? And that probably won't look like 90-minute long movies like we know from the theater. It'll look like, social media content that's like short and snappy. It'll be TV series that, not TV series, YouTube series that will look and feel very different, right? And so I think the key thing with AI video is that it's not just going to replace video as we know it. It'll probably have some impact on that eventually, but it always becomes its own new media formats. New technology always brings new media formats. And that'll be the young and the creative and the film students who will take these technologies. They'll create awesome things. And all the people who've been doing video for 30 years or 40 years will not like it. I think a lot of people don't understand like how early this still is. The technology has come a far way, of course, but we are still really early. And I also think a lot of people don't understand that, in 5-10 years, today some people, like the first time you see it, it's kind of like funny, it's a bit like wow, it's kind of weird. But in 5-10 years, it's going to be completely normal. Just like so many other things. The culture takes a lot longer time to move than the technology stuff usually, right? I remember when I grew up, for example, things like online dating was like for weirdos, right? Like who would do that? Now that's just like a completely normal thing. And there's so many other things like, shopping on the internet. I remember my mom and dad was like, you cannot shop on the internet when I was young because like only scammers. So it's like, there's a lot of these things that move with the times. And so I think in 5 or 10 years, Avatar is going to be everywhere and we're not going to think it's that strange. I think there's a lot of challenges with AI. It's going to be used by bad actors to do bad things, and we need to curb those. I think the most useful way of thinking about it is that I think a lot of people want to be very technology-centric when we talk about this, and talk a lot about the technology in itself. And ultimately, I think what AI will do is it'll amplify a bunch of things, a bunch of bad actors that are already doing bad things, right? And so what I think we need to focus on is what are the outcomes that we don't want to happen with AI? We don't want people to use AI to call up people on their phone with a cloned voice and pretend that your mom asking you to transfer money. We don't want to have AI systems that can reproduce adult material of women without their consent, right? And I think there's a long list of all these things that we know we don't want AI to do. And I think we should focus a lot on those because those are real things today. These are not like imaginative things in 5 or 10 years where AI may become conscious and take over the world. So I think we should focus on those things first. Then there are also a whole bunch of ethical challenges that are a bit more, in the future. What do we do when, the job markets will of course change? What will happen if someone truly invents a super intelligent being that, could do all sorts of things? But here I think we're more in the realm of philosophy to some extent. And I think that's super interesting, but I would prefer that we use 10% of the airtime on that and 90% of reducing all the harms that already exist today and that we can actually do something about. The first 3 years of the company, we basically tried to build technology for the video industry. And so agencies, production companies, and everyone was already making lots of great video content. What we realized was that the quality threshold for working with these folks were incredibly high, and the willingness to change any of the existing workflows was incredibly low. And so the first 3 years was not a disaster, it's kind of working, but it's very clear that building for this group of people would not lead to like the outcome that we were looking for. And so we figured out was there's actually, instead of focusing on the people who are already making lots of video, there are millions of people in the world who are not making videos today. And they really, really want to make videos. And a lot of those people, they don't work at these kind of companies. They work in a big corporate where they want to make a marketing video or training video. And so what we learned from these people was that if we could give them a way to make video, which was 1,000 times easier and 1,000 times more affordable than using a camera, they'd be okay with the quality of those videos being lower because their alternative was not a real beautiful video. Their alternative was no video. And what we also learned was that a lot of this kind of corporate video is actually just a person talking to the camera, right? And then it's like interlaid with some graphs. And so that format was, from where the tech was at the time, like a lot easier to replicate than let's build a system that can build absolutely any video you can think of. And so that led us down this path of building an avatar, building a platform that was self-service, so that we could onboard millions of people to make videos rather than trying to sell very like specialized technology to a few companies. I think it would take Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
He would absolutely hate our technology, I'm sure. But it'd be funny to see if we could convince him otherwise.
I do now.
I do. I try not to do it, but it's a very interesting point, right? Because we have a tendency of anthropomorphizing these kind of technologies when we're presented with them in a chat interface, because you're used to in a chat interface, you're speaking to like your friends or your family or something like that. And I also think a lot of I think that's cooled down a bit now, but like 12, 18 months ago, we went through this crazy kind of moral panic, right? Where everybody thought that GPT-5 is going to become conscious. It's just going to go absolutely crazy. And I think a lot of that fear was, first of all, completely, unfounded. We should definitely talk about existential risk, but that should be like 5-10% of the conversation, not 90%. But because it feels human, right? It's easy to make the leap from what you're playing around with today and kind of trying to turn that into something that has agency and intentions kind of like beyond what they were programmed for. I think in 5 years, you can make a Hollywood film from your laptop without needing anything else than just your imagination. My guess would be that the technology at that point is almost perfect. It will still take a lot of time, and there'll be a whole bunch of really, really crappy content that'll make it out there. And so it'll be about curation, right? And finding like what are the actual good content. But more than ever, it will be about who are great storytellers, who can create stories that relate to the world around us, the culture that we're in, and so on. And I think a lot of people kind of forget or think that like AI is going to replace all that. I think the kind of like logical answer would be no.
Yeah.
But I think that's too simplistic. I think it's a bit like saying, a few years ago, it's like you're a tech company, right? It's like every company today should be a tech company. If you're not a tech company, you probably have a problem. So I think I understand the kind of like rational argument around it, but I think we operate in the real world, and the real world is filled with humans who are never rational, right? We're actually far from rational. And so I do think that branding your company as AI and talking about it as being AI, even if you aren't really, probably is better than not doing it, because you will have more people interested in it. So I think, the world kind of takes a while to move on, and at some point, every company is going to be an AI company to some extent. But I think humans are not rational, and it's part of a sale, right? And when you're an entrepreneur and you have a company, you're selling all the time to employees, to investors. I think it's definitely real, right? It's not like we've been through VR, AR cycles, crypto cycles, like a lot of other technologies that never really went anywhere. Like they had a kind of a quick bump up in interest and investor money kind of going there. And probably at some point, we'll have VR, AR that actually truly works and it's a great product. But it's fair to say it's still not there yet. AI is different, and that's, just look at how people use it, how many people use it, and how many people are willing to pay for it. It's very clearly real, and it's going to transform everything we know about, how we live, work, and play. Of course, it's going to be massively, inflated valuations. The game of venture capital is that we create bubbles for a lot of money against companies, with a lot of different products against the wall, and most of them will fail. But out of those, there will come a bunch of big winners. I think on the foundation model layer, it's hard to compete with the kind of existing companies right now who all began building before the hype cycle. We also did, but there's still going to be, many $100 billion plus companies that are founded in the coming years. but I think history repeats itself. There'll be lots of things that go nowhere, but some that go somewhere really big. And as an investor, it's your job to find out which ones of those it is. And as a consumer, you have to find out which products deliver actual value. I think the London ecosystem is building. And I think for the last 10 years, the ecosystem in Europe has not really delivered any global winners, but I think that's actually changing now. There's a lot of great companies emerging from London who are not just regional leaders, but global leaders. And getting a conference like South by Southwest London here, I think is a testament to the ecosystem actually being real, right? So I'm excited. I think there's a lot of founders, there's a lot of people in Europe that want Europe to be pro-growth, that want us to accelerate, that want us to build global winners. And all that, is an ecosystem effort. So I think it's great that we begin to get some of the world's best conferences here. I mean, the US is clearly winning, right? I don't think there's any contesting that. China is also doing really well. I think the UK is doing really well. I think the UK has, to some extent, been lucky/smart not to be in the EU any longer, because it's not put under EU regulation. And that actually has created an ecosystem here, but there's a lot of ambition, there's a lot of great companies. And I think there's a very real opportunity for the UK to become not the global AI superpower, but become one of the really important players here, right? And then there's the EU, who is, as always, regulating themselves to death. EU has all the regulations and none of the AI startups. And as someone who is European, I am Danish myself, that really worries me, and I hope we can change that.